What's your favorite scary movie? For 30 years, that one question has defined a generation of horror, and tonight the rules have changed once again. Ghostface is back, Sidney Prescott is in the crosshairs, and the body count is higher than ever. In this episode, we're slashing through the latest chapter, Scream 7, to see if it lives up to the legend. Then we're doing the impossible. We're going to be ranking the entire franchise from the original 1996 masterpiece to the blood-soaked streets of Pine Grove. So grab your popcorn, lock your doors, and whatever you do, don't answer the phone. We're diving into the massive opening weekend for Scream 7. It's already tracking to outpace Scream 4, proving that the franchise still has legs. Overall, I landed on a 3.5 out of 5 on my Letterboxd rating. I didn't hate it as much as a lot of the internet seems to, but it's definitely a divisive entry for sure. What I did really like was some of the new family dynamic. I thought that was a good way to move forward with Sydney's story, because we've just did about everything with her so far, but we have not seen her as a mother and as a wife yet. So I thought that was a good step forward for the series. I really liked Joel McHale being cast as Sydney's husband and like the sheriff. I thought it worked really well. And, again, too, as it was nice to see a different Sydney in this version of Scream, because we've seen her as a survivor and as a recluse, but seeing her as a mom and wife added more of a layer of vulnerability that we haven't seen before. And it really raised the stakes, I felt like, because having a family man and a lawman as her partner made the threats against her home feel more grounded and much more dangerous than we've seen in previous Screams. But the main highs for me out of this new film was it felt like the kill count was better. And what I mean by that is this Ghostface felt a lot more aggressive than than in other Scream movies. It felt like they threw people and really beat people up more and tackled people and sprinted and really went after people way more aggressively. I know we were kind of moving in that direction more so with Scream 5 and 6, but really I felt like 7 was, had a lot more of that type of energy like that. And as far as the kill count goes, it felt much more aggressive and gorier for where Scream has been before. You just see a lot more on screen because, like, in previous movies, a lot of times it's just like a quick number of stabs and then they like cut away and then they go to, something else. But to where here you see more of that, of the stuff of like the damage that was inflicted upon the victims in this movie. And for example, like a really good kill that stood out to me was the guy who was killed in the bar and his head was, put on the beer tap thing. And I thought that was a really cool kill. And I was really surprised that like they went to that level in this movie because that was almost on the level of Terrifier type kill. And same thing with actually the very ending of the movie. Like it went like even further with the aggressiveness. And, you see a lot with that, finally takeout of the killer was definitely, some Terrifier energy. There was also a really standout set piece that I thought beyond the kills was there was a really good sequence in Sydney's house where you have Sydney and her daughter Tatum, and they basically go into this escape room and they're in between the wall and they're trying to escape, and then Ghostface is tapping on the wall to see where it's like denser and then stabbing the knife through the wall. And I thought that was a really cool sequence there. And, it just made you feel so claustrophobic and like, oh, how do you get out of that one? And I thought that was a great sequence. I wish, there would be more kind of scenes like that. The only other, kind of confined space scene that I can think of in horror off the top of my head, like I'm sure they've happened other times, like obviously, yes, The Descent is very, kind of claustrophobic, but like I still think of, I thought of The Conjuring immediately because there was a scene when Lorraine Warren, like I think falls down like in between the wall somehow, like almost into the basement, and she's kind of like stuck for a second. I guess that was the closest thing, but you don't have like a killer on the other side. But this was a really cool sequence, I thought. And I thought there was also a really great nod to the past with the theater kill, and it was really cool because it reminded me of Scream 2 so much. Um, and then again, seeing the killer get taken out at the very end of the movie was genuinely satisfying. There are some other issues that go along with that, but I will get into that. But as far as the mixed bag goes, I would say, the big things are like the Stu and AI problem, just because I pretty much called out that it was going to be AI kind of from the start because I was like, it seemed too good for Stu to actually be back, you know? And the movie tried to tackle AI and fan theories, but it felt kind of like a cop out just because like you have all this marketing which was really playing into like these Scream fan like conspiracy theories like is Stu actually back when a lot of people think, he survived and, as a Stu is alive theorist myself, uh, the way they used him felt like it was just catering to us without a real like payoff. And I thought they could have had more better commentary on the use of AI and in the film industry in general, and just like the dangers that go with that in real life. I thought there could have been better things with that. And then, I really felt like there was some underused talent in this movie. McKenna Grace is cast as Tatum's best friend. I don't remember her character's name at this time, but we didn't really get a lot out of her just because she was killed off earlier in the film. And I guess maybe that's on point with a lot of other Scream films because they do divert your expectations because there's a lot of characters before that you think are going to be a mainstay and kind of stick around towards the end that get taken out quite early on. I mean, that's been that way from the very first Scream with having Drew Barrymore's character killed in the very opening, and you would think that she would be the final girl, but she was not. And so maybe there was some of that just because McKenna Grace has been in a lot of movies and a lot of really big franchises. I thought somebody said like, maybe 12 big franchises or something. The main thing that stuck, out to me was I kept thinking of her as playing the girl in the couple of newer Ghostbusters movies, and I really liked her in those. I mean, I know that's still several years ago now, and I know she's been in, quite a few other things too, but I just thought that her talent wasn't used as much as what it could have been, and it kind of just, kind of felt like a waste to me. I mean, I guess maybe that's just what the script called for. And then the other thing too that kind of felt like a waste was you have the Meeks twins returning, which were in, Scream 5 and Scream 6, and they were part of, the core four. We were kind of transitioning away from the legacy characters, and it was kind of moving into, their story more, and with, Melissa Barrera and, Jenna Ortega as sisters and stuff. And then you have the Meeks twins. But anyway, the inclusion of the Meeks twins, kind of felt last minute towards like, you still have them in there to be like, okay, like, the, previous two movies are still canon to, Scream 7, but it kind of just felt like it was just kind of slapped together. And, I don't know. I just felt like they could have did more with their characters. They just kind of felt so like off to the side and be like, we have to make sure they say at least a couple things and whatever. And, they didn't have like, lore drops as much in this. And, like the other movies, so that was kind of missing. And I thought the first two acts were pretty solid overall. I really liked the opening, even though it kind of seemed like in hindsight it is very disconnected from the rest of the movie. Like it was a badass opening for sure, but those characters don't, as far as I know, aren't connected to the other people we meet in the rest of the film. So it kind of just seemed like, hey, let's have this huge sequence just to show that Ghostface is back, So and then the third act just did not feel long enough, and it felt really rushed. And the killer reveal really did not make sense. The real lows of it for this movie that I would say would be that Kevin Williamson directed it, but you could tell he didn't write it. I think he's written like most of the other Scream films, and they're much better and stronger writing. To where like he directed this, but I don't believe he wrote it, and it makes a big difference. And the writing seemed very basic and a lot more flat. Like these characters are basically like, as people call them, cannon fodder. Like you're just waiting for them to be taken out essentially. And you don't really have a lot of investment with them so much, because even like Sydney and her daughter like just felt like very basic. Like they could have had a better story there of Sydney kind of passing the torch, or actually sharing what she went through and how she could have better protected her daughter instead of just leaving her in the dark. I think there would have been better ways to do that, and how she could have prepared Tatum and also kind of made her into a stronger person and able to defend herself more and be ready to be on her own in the future. And I thought that story could have just been a lot better. It just felt very basic. I did think it was cool and, very sentimental that, she named her daughter after her best friend, Tatum, who was killed in the very first Scream movie. So I thought that was, kind of a nice nod. And, there were other, kind of cool Easter eggs here and there. I wouldn't say that I'm like the biggest Scream fan, but I have, enjoyed all the movies. And I feel like overall it is a pretty, decent franchise. And the lighting seemed so dark. Also, it seemed like you could kind of barely see the action that was going on at times. I thought that could have been better. Like, I know, like, for a horror movie, it's, dark and dim and bleak, but, I don't know. It's just hard to even make out what is happening. Like, I don't know if that was, an issue with my specific theater that I saw it at or, why it seemed that way. Maybe that's just my own personal opinion. And then the big thing is that I kind of said before, the killer reveal was a major letdown. The reveal was odd, and we didn't really spend enough time with the killers to even guess who they, really were. Though I did suspect the neighbor kind of from like the start because I just thought she was odd. And then she also just kind of jumped into things right away in the coffee shop. And I don't know, it just didn't feel like there was a lot there really to work with. And the motive just seemed dumb to me. It really did. Just, it seems like we've gotten that kind of stuff before of, her motive. And it was just weird and out of place because I feel like, even like Sydney's character in the movie, like, wait, why are you doing this? It didn't really make sense to where it's just like they had a deeper connection, or at least it kind of linked back to the original in a better way, and this just did not really do that. And I thought Tatum's boyfriend was for sure like, a major red herring that he would not be the killer just because like, we've done that several times before. And also too, I don't remember if he had like that blue flannel on or not, like, other killers did. Or then also too, you have like Tatum's best friend who had like, I think like a blue skirt or something. And I was like, okay, that's gotta be just way too on the nose for them to actually be the killer, either of them. So I kind of, felt like I sniffed that out kind of right away. And I don't know. And then it was just stupid too, like for having the other killer be like the guy that was working at like the mental hospital. Like it's just like, wait, who? That felt very much like Friday the 13th part 5, a new beginning kind of type motive. It felt stupid and it reminded me of that so much. And the big void for me in this movie was that the absence of Melissa Barrera and Jenna Ortega. And, the core four story feels really unfinished just because, like, I was curious where they were going to be heading had the seventh Scream movie be what it should have been. And, it seemed like, Melissa's character would have become like a new, like, ghost face and stuff. And I thought there was a lot more, meat left on the bone of things to do with that. And, I felt like there was more of a story to tell, and we'll never really know. I hope things ever work out to where they can, finally make the correct movie and what that should have been. So maybe if that's what ends up becoming of Scream 8, I think that would be great. But I don't know, just because it seems like the studios have not, treated her very well. So I can't blame her if she never wants to work with them again. But that was just the big thing that was missing. It was like we had, both those movies, 5 and 6. I like 5 better than 6. It just felt like we, had a great story going there, and I liked, the introduction of the core four, and that we could have did more with that. And this just, I don't know, this entry just kind of seemed like a little bit out of place. It makes me wonder if this movie was meant to feel like a stab movie, like if they did that on purpose. Like, I do like that they were catering to the fans, but it was almost like, are the fans just writing the movie basically at this point? Like, are we making the stab movies in real life? Like, that's kind of what it felt like. And it felt a lot less like a Scream film just because like you didn't have as much of that meta commentary. And that kind of was its own production issue. Maybe partially because like, we've had like a couple movies, in the last like 4 years already. And I don't see that there were that, big of changes in horror, because like from that gap between Scream 4 and 5, you had more of that elevated horror, type stuff like the Babadook, which was mentioned and other things. And that was, great commentary for that. Then also too, like kind of fans getting out of hand and getting obsessed and kind of doing their own things. I thought that was all good commentary, but here it's like it doesn't really feel like there were that drastic of changes. So like the only kind of meta-ness there really was, saying like, oh, missed you in New York, Sid, and stuff like that. Like that was kind of it to where it's like, kind of poking fun at itself. Like, hey, we couldn't work out something with Nev Campbell. So, hey, remember she wasn't in the sixth movie? And that's kind of what it felt like. And, I really see that, Scream 8 is probably inevitable because like with how huge a numbers this did at the box office. And it just makes me wonder because like I've been seeing more people that are like, hey, it's not really as bad as what a lot of people are saying, but at the same point there's still been so many negative videos and reviews about this movie. And it's like I feels like just people are going to the movie to be like, oh, is Stu actually back, or like is this movie as garbage as people are saying. So it's like it makes me wonder if that's what the draw is, or if it's just because of the name, like Scream is an established franchise and that's why so many people are going. I mean, I'm glad people are supporting the movie and that they're supporting theaters. I think that's great, but I'm just saying that I think this movie could have been better than what it was. Do I think it was horrible? No. But could it have been better? Yes. So again, Scream 8 is inevitable, but I really feel like the franchise needs to, pass the torch. And I think they need to stop being afraid to kill off its main legacy characters, because I see Scream kind of having an issue like similar to Stranger Things, to where like they are so afraid to kill fan favorites. Like, yes, they did take out Dewey in Scream 5, and I thought that was a great choice. I mean, in Scream 2, yes, Randy did get taken out, and he is a very lovable character. But I'm just saying, it feels like it's got dragged out for so long with Sydney and Gail didn't really feel like herself as much in this movie. Like, she just kind of felt like she was there, like she kind of got, in 5 and 6, like her time to deal with Dewey's death, or, before he was killed off in Scream 5, of kind of seeing him again a little bit. So, her character seems stronger then, but I feel like there has to be like a big change to where like, either one of them has to get taken out or they both do somehow, and we could somehow move forward with, Tatum and some other characters. And I really, I liked the core 4 characters, and we were able to work, uh Lissa and Jenna's characters back into this, I think would be great. And then if you, had the, Meeks twins doing a bigger part, because that's the interesting thing for Scream, is that like Ghostface is the one thing that continues from movie to movie, but it's like it can be anyone. And I feel like there are a lot of, possibilities left with this, because on the flip side of that, I don't feel like there's really much left like for Sydney's story. Like how much juice is there left really to squeeze? I think we're just about at the end of the road with her story. I think that she is one of the best final girls of all time, Sydney Prescott, for sure. But I'm just saying, I think we've kind of gotten enough of her story to where like it is just time to, move things along and maybe do something very different. And I think there could be a lot of different ideas and avenues you could go down, and, things they even did with like, Scream 4, had they ended that differently, or even Scream 6, how they, could have started that off. Like, there's ways to flip this franchise on its head and, keep going. I wouldn't be surprised if we got up to like 10 movies with this franchise. That's just kind of my thoughts. But in summary, started off strong, kind of fell apart in the end, and it was a, very weak killer reveal. And I kind of agree with the consensus that this is probably the worst killer reveal and motive in the franchise. But, I did like Joel McHale's performance, and then, I thought the mom version of Sydney was decent, but we could have got more with that, the high tension house sequence, in between the wall there while they were trying to escape was great. But my, key gripes are weak writing, stupid killer reveal, and the lack of the core 4. But overall, I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. What did you guys think of Scream 7? Do you want a Scream 8, or do you just want them to be done with the franchise? Let me know. Whether you love the latest chapter or thought it missed the mark, there's no denying the massive shadow the original films cast. But where exactly does Scream 7 land in the hierarchy of horror? It's time to settle the debate. We're slashing our way through all 7 films to find out which one reigns supreme. Let's get into the ranking. Coming in at number 7 for me is Scream 3. I found that it was interesting that it was set in Hollywood on the set of a stab movie, and it became more of a movie in a movie, but it seems more campy and Scooby-Doo-like than the other entries in the Scream series. The voice changer thing really kind of took away the realism for me, and it just seemed kind of too goofy and just, too kind of unbelievable. And the killer reveal in this one seemed a bit more convoluted than others, because like it's like, oh, it was Sydney's long lost half brother that we didn't know about, and it's like, what? It just kind of seemed very out of the blue with that. And, Sydney wasn't in as much of it because I think Nev Campbell was kind of, like more pressed for like shooting time or something. And I think she had other like scheduling conflicts or something like that. The Gail's bangs are kind of bad in this movie. And I mean, Courtney Cox, in retrospect, I don't think she really liked them either. I do feel like, though, in this movie that, Sydney did, move into being more of a leader and was able to help others. And she wasn't just so helpless or like, hiding. She, did become a bit stronger in that aspect of what we did get out of her performance. And then coming in 6th place is Scream 7. I talked about this in another video. I gave a full review of this, and Not horrible, but could have been better. Had great kills and it was gorier, had a good opening, but the writing was lacking and it wasn't as meta as the other films, so it really kind of didn't feel as much like a Scream movie. And the killer reveal and the ending was just not good. Not good. It just kind of fell flat. We were building up to something in the first two acts, and it just did not really pay off. In fifth place, I put Scream 6. I thought it was a great opening scene with unique twists and getting, the Ghostface reveal right away. We could have had a complete different movie if we would have just, like followed the Ghostface for the whole time. Like, what I mean by that is that we had the opportunity to do something different than other Scream movies to where, like, we could have known Ghostface's identity from the start. That could have been a unique idea, but then they just did away with it immediately, and it kind of became like a similar formula to other Screams. The subway sequence was cool, and I really like that with all the Halloween masks and then Ghostface emerging. I thought that was a really cool sequence. I felt like this was another, more aggressive Ghostface, and I really liked the sequence of the ladder crawl between apartments. Like, that was a really cool like shot and everything, and you really kind of feel like the tension. And it's like if you screw something up, you're falling to your death, pretty much, or you're very, very badly injured, if anything, if you do survive it somehow. And that was a really cool scene. I haven't seen anything like that in any of the other movies. And then I really like the convenience store scene when Ghostface comes in with the shotgun. That was very different than what we've gotten in previous movies. Especially like when Ghostface is masked. Like, I don't think they really use a gun. Most times they've used a gun. It's just been kind of in like the third act once we already know who the Ghostface killers were in the current movie, but I hadn't seen a sequence like that, so that was kind of cool. I did enjoy that the core four seemed to have a bit stronger chemistry in that, and seeing their story get fleshed out a bit more. But I felt like too many of the characters survive a lot of damage, so it's like you really have to suspend your disbelief. And the three killers reveal was predictable, and just to get revenge for Richie being killed in the movie before. So it's like we've kind of seen that before, and there were a lot of major plot holes and logic issues with this one, so not horrible. I thought it was just kind of, okay. Coming in fourth place is Scream 2. I really loved the opening in the movie theater. I thought that was kind of cool. I wish, more movies would do something like that, to be like, again, a kind of movie in a movie thing. Maybe it's a little overdone, but I thought it was kind of, kind of fun. And the police car escape was great. That's kind of burned into my mind. Whenever I think of that movie, I think of that sequence. And I really liked that it was a great transition into the college setting. I thought that was a good step forward. I mean, obviously, like, Sydney was in her senior year of high school in the first movie anyway, so you had to go somewhere. So I like that, and utilizing, the campus setting a bit. And I thought, that there were some great bold kills, and I really liked the decision to take out Randy. He is, very beloved, and I, personally like his character a lot too. I thought that was a good choice, and to be like, hey, nobody is safe, But I will say on the flip side that it does have some pacing issues. And, to me, it felt like the, killer reveal was less impactful than the original. It just didn't really pack the same punch, So, not horrible, but, still decent. And then coming in third place, these top three, like, I really feel like could, kind of trade places easily. And, overall for the Scream franchise, there's not any movie that's horrible. Even with Scream 3 being at the very bottom of my list, it's not bad, and it's much better entry than many other horror movies that have been made. And same thing with Scream 7. It's not awful. It's just for like the quality that this franchise has been, it's maybe not what it should be. But that being said, coming in third place is Scream 4. I thought it really had great commentary on social media fame and reboots, and it was talking about influencers before that was kind of even really a thing. So it was very ahead of its time in that way, and I don't think really people give it enough credit for that. And I like the opening with the couple of stab movies. I thought that was really cool, and I thought it was a strong killer reveal. And again too, like they could have brought the franchise in a totally different direction. Had they ended the movie kind of a different way. And killer at the end of Scream 4, I thought was a strong reveal, and had they ended the movie in a different direction, it could have really been her taking the torch instead of Sydney, and we could have had a much different journey moving forward, had they decided to do that, But on the negatives for this movie, like the whatever filter they used for the movie, I didn't even think about it the first time that I, watched it. I've only actually seen it all the way through one time, and then I've just kind of seen some other clips, and I've watched other people's reviews of it, and people that are more in tune with like filmmaking and like the lighting of films and stuff, they were like, the filter of this movie does not look good. And again, I didn't think anything of it, the first time, but then looking back, I was like, oh, it does look bad. It just looks odd. And this was the last Scream movie that Wes Craven filmed, and I think this might have been the last movie he made in general. I could be wrong on that, but that's what I thought. And I don't know, it's just like whatever kind of, whatever filter or whatever they did with the lighting, it doesn't match the others, and it just kind of looks out of place. I don't know. And the new cast wasn't as strongly written, I felt like. Again, too, Killer Reveal was good and like a couple of other characters, but a lot of it, it's like I didn't feel like I got as much investment in that, and it came off as a little bit more slapstick with its humor, and it didn't, totally get the mix right of the kind of horror and comedy elements of Scream. But coming in second place, I put Scream 2022, or Scream, or, Scream 5, as they say. It's, really just titled as Scream, which I thought was a cool nod to, the reboot culture that was going on, like especially with Halloween 2018 that had just come out like a few years before this. And I thought that the opening scene was pretty good. I really like that with Jenna Ortega's character Tara, and it seemed quite a bit closer to the original Scream opening with Drew Barrymore's character. And I thought that the new cast was really good. I liked the core four. I enjoyed them a lot, and it was cool, kind of the elements of having them be mixed with the old cast, and I thought it was a good way of moving forward. I felt like the Ghostface became more brutal in this one, and we had great suspense sequences, and I thought it connected to the original in unique ways, and I liked that they were bold enough to finally kill off a legacy character with taking out Dewey. Like, I know they did in Scream 2, but it's like that was several movies ago at this point, and that they've been spread out, for the most part over, quite a few years. Now we're at, 30 years of this franchise. And I thought that was a good move to do that. And, I hope they do that, in the next, like, Scream movie, is that if they were to either, take out Gail or Sydney, I think would be a good move, honestly, just because we need to do something to switch this up. The motive for this didn't feel as strong to me. It kind of felt a little bit basic, just be like, oh, yeah, of course, like, you want to make your perfect movie, basically your perfect reboot, kind of seemed a little bit cliche in that way. And the movie didn't seem as bold with its commentary. I did like that, it mentions like elevated horror and things. Like, it was very funny and a good way to, poke fun at the rest of the horror genre, especially I felt like in the opening of the movie, to where, Tara's like, I don't know about slashers. I know like The Babadook and like Hereditary and like, different things like that. So that was kind of funny, just because like there's so many people that, I feel like that are also lovers of horror movies, but are like, oh, slashers, and they'll be like, well, I like kind of more the psychological, stuff. And anyway, not as strong as some other movies, but I just think maybe we didn't have as much to say just because we covered so much previously up to this point. Through process of elimination, that leaves us just with one movie left. And coming in first place is the original Scream from 1996. And, this revolutionized the horror genre and became, so self-aware and flipped everything on its head and, way ahead of its time. I mean, and since then we've got, many more movies that are more self-aware and self-referential and kind of can poke fun at themselves. And, definitely one of the greatest opening scenes in horror and in cinema, in my opinion. And, the two-killer twist was great. I really love that a lot. Billy and Stu are great killers, especially for me, honestly. Like, Billy is very dark, and I like that he's balanced out with kind of like the, goofiness of Stu, and how he was kind of bored and kind of taken along for the ride, sort of, and peer pressured into, going through this whole scheme. And I really love Matthew Lillard a lot. He's one of my favorite actors for sure. I always think of him fondly as Shaggy, to be honest, more so. I thought that it really balanced, the tense tone, the horror with the dark sense of humor that it was going for. This established Sidney Prescott as one of the best final girls in horror, and I definitely agree. And, I didn't like it as much upon a rewatch. I have not rewatched the entire Scream franchise. I've rewatched the first one and the fifth one, and I think that's about it at this point. Otherwise, the other films I've only seen, once. And maybe that's just because, like, the mystery and the mystique of them like kind of really hits you more the first time, just because a lot of other slasher films you're not really having a mystery that you're kind of putting together and finding the pieces of the puzzle. So maybe that's what made the difference. It's not that it makes it a bad film. It, really grabbed me the first time I watched it, like I said, but, upon a rewatch, it was not as good, did not have the same impact for me. And maybe that could change upon further viewings. Does not mean it's a bad movie. And, I definitely respect it a lot for what it's did. And clearly it had to be a great movie in order for, so many people to fall in love and have such a huge impact on, horror and pop culture in general, but, it does feel a little bit dated and has some logic gaps. That's a horror movie for you. And, the middle act moves a little bit slow, and it is funny, that it talks about, like, horror movie tropes, like, especially when Sydney is on the phone with Ghostface, and, it's like, oh, yeah, that, like, if somebody's chasing after you with a knife, you should be running out the front door, but they always choose to run upstairs. Then immediately after that, Ghostface comes after her, and she runs upstairs instead of running out the door. But it's also one of those things, like, when you're in a fight or flight situation, it really made it feel a little bit more real in that way. Like, although it is goofy, but like when your mind is just racing so much like that, you would probably make a rash decision as well like that. So I just thought that it was an interesting moment that they, kind of, again, poke fun at themselves. This has been another deep dive here on Rhythm Roast Reels. What are your personal rankings? Do you think the Core 4 era holds up against the original trilogy, or are the classics just untouchable? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and let's get the debate started. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.